offshore to the north has highlighted the need for more and better telecommunications infrastructure up there. Pending commercial development, including air and ship traffic, and we've all heard a lot about military activity up there, indicate that telecom needs extend well offshore to the north. As Juanetta said, as I said, we've asked our speakers to, as far as possible, address each one of these issues, at least one. And as Juanetta said, during the presentations, we've asked you to put your questions in the chat, and then Juanetta will curate and ask those after all the speakers have finished. So with that, it's time to start. Our first speaker is Christine O'Connor, Executive Director of the Alaska Telecom Association. Christine, go ahead.
Thank you, Alex. Good morning. Thank you for the invitation to join the panel. We had a similar panel last year and it was very informative, so I'm delighted to be here this morning. As Alex said, my name is Christine O'Connor. I'm the Executive Director of Alaska Telecom Association. Juanetta, would you like me to share my screen or? There we go. Thank you. This morning, I just wanted to talk a little bit about ATA's member broadband providers, where they serve, give you an overview of the statewide networks, and tell you about some of the exciting projects that are expanding broadband in Alaska. And particularly in relation to Alex's question about the need for services in Alaska's remote areas, I want to look at the potential for even more expansion kind of further out from our hub communities. Next slide, please. ATA was formed in 1949. We're the trade association for telecommunications companies in Alaska. Our members provide traditional landline voice service, wireless service, and these days it's all about broadband. ATA works to support and advocate for telecom services throughout Alaska. Something a lot of people don't know is that ATA's membership is diverse. If you look at the array of logos there, we range from small family-owned to statewide companies. We have 7 community-owned cooperatives, nearly half the membership. We have 4 privately owned companies, 1 municipally owned, 1 employee-owned, and 2 publicly traded companies. Although you may have seen the big announcement yesterday about the transaction for Alaska Communications, and I just want to congratulate the folks over there for the opportunities that that transaction will bring. It's a pretty exciting time. Next slide, please. The title of the presentation had this acronym ILEC in it, which really is an old school kind of jargony term that means the telephone companies. This is a snapshot of where they serve. But I wanted to point out that most of these companies, they're all Alaska based. Many have wireless company affiliates and of course broadband. Next slide, please. This is a picture of the fixed broadband coverage in Alaska. It's just a snapshot. It's not very granular. The reporting that we have at this point is pretty broad, but just to give you a sense of where the coverage is. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to show you this wireless coverage map. Again, not very granular, but the point is mobile broadband service is expanding further and further away from our rail belt. And that's an important service that we all enjoy and rely on, and it is getting pushed into the more remote areas. So that's just a very high level look at ATA's members and where they are serving in Alaska. Now I want to turn to what's happening with the networks, the broadband infrastructure in Alaska. Next slide, please. Middle mile is a word that you absolutely cannot get away from when we talk about broadband infrastructure. It's critical. To get to the internet or broadband, you have to connect to the world with middle mile infrastructure. And historically, that has been a big challenge in Alaska. Alaska's middle mile is a combination of terrestrial fiber and undersea fiber running thousands of miles south. I love this picture. This is a bear literally chewing on the Canadian side of the Alcan 1 project when it was under construction. We also have microwave networks covering hundreds of miles, picture of AT&T's microwave tower in Southeast. And where there's no fiber or microwave connection, satellites provide that middle mile connection. My point here is we are unique in our middle mile situation compared to the lower 48. Our counterparts down south, they rarely have to consider how they will get a middle mile connection or even how much it will cost. Quite a few years ago now, the FCC contracted to build a model that would estimate how much it costs to build broadband. And they literally estimated that middle mile was zero, no cost. So as usual, when policymakers think about Alaska, we have to educate them to where our needs are. We still have gaps. So next slide, please. But things are changing rapidly for middle mile networks in Alaska. This was the middle mile network in 2010. You can see the undersea cables connecting us to the lower 48, the beginnings of the Terra microwave network in Western Alaska, and some microwave on Kodiak Island. Everywhere else it was satellite middle mile. Next slide, please. And this is the first forum where I've shown our 2020 middle mile map. Jump ahead 10 years and it's a dramatic change. In recent years, there has been massive investment in middle mile infrastructure. There's new connectivity along the North Slope, MAC, great work. We've got expansion of microwave networks in Southeast, Southwest, Northwest, new fiber running up the Dalton Highway, and terrestrial links into Canada with LCAN 1. There are still gaps, and that's where our struggle is in getting to the remote villages. But every year there are more projects that are closing those gaps link by link. Next slide, please. So this year alone, major middle mile projects have been completed. To give you a sense, just a sense of the tremendous level of activity, here are a few listings of the middle mile projects that ATA members have been completing. Ketchikan, KPU Telecom completed a $12 million 90-mile subsea fiber connecting Ketchikan to Prince Rupert. Ketchikan 1, it's a historic achievement. It's the first undersea connection to Canada, and that leverages into KPU's fully fiber to the prem network in Ketchikan. This spring, MTA turned up LCAN 1. It's the first terrestrial connection from Alaska to the lower 48 through Canada. Nushagak Cooperative in my hometown, Dillingham, completed a major expansion of their microwave network into Dillingham, dramatically increasing the speeds of broadband they can provide to their members, their member owners. Alaska Power and Telephone constructed an undersea cable between Juneau, Haines, and Skagway, and is doubling the capacity of their Southeast Alaska microwave network between Juneau and Ketchikan. I have more to say about AT&T in future slides. I'll pause the laundry list there, but I wanted to give you just a sense of the incredible activity in this space. Next slide, please. Paired with middle mile, once you get the connection there, you do need last mile. We are, again, a little bit backwards from the lower 48. Often we'll have a terrific last mile network sitting there. There have been great improvements in last mile, waiting for the middle mile to plug in. And since 2015, nearly 119,000 last mile locations have been upgraded or newly deployed. Some of those projects include Copper Valley Telecom recently completed a fiber to the home project into Titlic, capable of delivering 25 megabit speeds. Alaska Communications has brought high-speed internet to 16,000 rural locations since 2017 and will reach another 16,000 by 2025. GCI has been upgrading network equipment and platforms to increase capacity in response to the pandemic, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. Everyone that could went online, as we know. Alaska Power and Telephone has completed fiber to the home in many southeast and interior locations. And Cordova Telecom has expanded mobile broadband coverage, so LTE, across 2,000 square miles of Prince William Sound. Next slide, please. But what's next? We're not done. Everyone knows we're not done. We need to get out to those most remote parts of Alaska. And the question is, how do we build and operate ubiquitous, sustainable broadband networks? It's a complex puzzle. Someone mentioned when we were visiting ahead of the call, it's a small group here in Alaska. We're making tremendous progress. We're seeing multiple pieces coming together to fill the gaps. First, investment from Alaska's telecom community. Every ATA member has been investing heavily in Alaska's broadband network for decades. Just since 2017, ATA's member companies have invested over $1 billion in building and maintaining the networks. And that's just in CapEx investment. Second, It's critical we have stable, predictable programs at the federal level. Remember the 119,000 locations. That build out is being driven by the federal Connect America Fund administered by the FCC. Stable rules intended to encourage broadband deployment are doing just that. The state has a role too, through their school bag program that supports school internet and the Alaska Universal Service Fund that more broadly supports telecommunications networks. And there are new initiatives I'll touch on as we go forward, taking shape right now that promise to help connect more Alaskans. Next slide, please. One of the most promising new initiatives is the USDA ReConnect pilot program. This began in 2019 with a mandate to fast-track broadband grants. The first round of awards was made last fall, and Cordova Telecom was awarded $18.9 million in grant funding to connect Yakutat with a microwave network you can see that will span the coast and provide speeds, total capacity of 2.6 gigabits per second, and will provide access to 100 megabits over a fiber to the home network in Yakutat. It's a big project, and it would not have been possible without the leadership of Cordova Telecom, the support of their member owners, and strong support from Yakutat, and of course, USDA. Next slide, please. Round 2 of ReConnect is in progress right now, and awards are being announced. In fact, just 2 weeks ago, you probably saw USDA announce 2 major awards. Alaska Power and Telephone will build a new subsea cable from Juneau to Petersburg and Prince of Wales Island. They will also construct local networks in Kaufman Cove and Kassan to provide high-speed broadband. And looking forward, that undersea cable will support build-out and increase speeds across Prince of Wales Island. One thing that my middleman map is struggling to show because of scale is that there are other links. Prince of Wales Island has multiple fiber links across the island that will be able to take advantage of this new undersea cable. So this is a huge project, and I congratulate Alaska Power and Telephone just for their vision and dedication to their communities. Next slide, please. And the other huge award is to GCI to build an 800-mile subsea fiber system from Kodiak along the south side of the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutians to Unalaska. Along the route, the fiber will come ashore in Larsen Bay, Chignik Bay, Sand Point, King Cove, and Akutan, where service will be provided with fixed wireless networks to connect homes and businesses with 100 megabit symmetric speeds. In Unalaska, GCI will deploy a fiber to the premises network to connect homes and businesses and allow access to 1 gigabit speeds. These are absolutely transformational projects, and the awards are a testament to the commitment of GCI and Alaska Power and Telephone. USDA has done a tremendous job in creating the ReConnect program and expediting it to enable the projects to be built as quickly as possible. It's a powerful example of what can happen when a new program aligns with existing state and federal programs and becomes a springboard for these great advances in our infrastructure. I want to give a great shout out to our congressional delegation. Senator Murkowski, Senator Sullivan, Congressman Young, and their staff have been unceasing in their work to inform DC policymakers. It's resulting in moving the needle on broadband in Alaska, and we're just really seeing the results of their commitment, so thank you to them. Next slide, please. I'm just touching on this. The rest of the panel will give a great information I'm really looking forward to hearing. We are eagerly watching the developments of the low Earth orbit satellites, LEOs, and talking to these companies and just welcome this development to enable us to hopefully get further out and provide better service in our areas. So I'll move on from there and wait for the better experts. Next slide, please. You may have heard about the 2.5 gigahertz rural tribal spectrum. This was a unique opportunity for tribes in rural areas to directly access unassigned spectrum over tribal lands. The spectrum has been applied for by tribes over most of Alaska. You can see the dark green areas. When combined with equipment, middle mile capacity, and a plan for sustainability, the spectrum could be a piece of the puzzle in bringing broadband service to Alaskans. Next slide. And still thinking about new initiatives, how do we get out to those remote areas? As we've already seen, USDA is making a splash in broadband these days. besides the ReConnect program we've seen already, Community Connect grants provide up to $3 million for broadband projects. And there have been multiple awards in Alaska in recent years. There is informed expectation, I would call it, that there will be a ReConnect round 3. So that would be another opportunity to inject grant funding to kind of build that infrastructure out even further. The Distance Learning and Telemedicine Program, USDA recently awarded over $4 million for 6 projects in Alaska. And the Denali Commission has explicitly cited broadband as a priority and is working with USDA to support these opportunities for Alaskans. Next slide, please. And in Congress, leaders across the board have realized the importance of broadband in ways I don't think they always did before. It's almost been a little startling to us where we've been, you know, broadband, 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 and all of a sudden that message is coming back to us. So it's an exciting and encouraging time. The House included $100 billion in the HEROES Act, and there are multiple other bills introduced or being discussed which include funding for broadband. Regardless of the legislation which eventually proceeds, I'm optimistic that there will be an infusion of broadband funding. And here again, our delegation is vigilant. They're continually looking for ways to advocate for Alaska in this space. It's important that whatever funding does come our way is complementary to the successful programs like the Connect America Fund and ReConnect, which are working very powerfully together right now. Next slide, please. And very quickly, I just want to thank ATA's member companies for everything they have done to support Alaska during the COVID-19 pandemic. We immediately saw increase in demand on the networks, 40% in many areas. The networks were ready to go. The member companies were ready. Companies immediately jumped in to offer connectivity to students, teachers, those without internet access. You saw a range of increased speeds, free packages. They stood up free Wi-Fi hotspots in many communities. They designed and installed intranets for schools to reach their teachers and students. And they suspended disconnects for non-payment. So every company is working to help Alaskans during this stretch. And I'd just like to thank them for that. And those are my kind of a shotgun effect. Thank you again very much for the invitation. And I look forward to hearing from the panelists and to your questions.
Great, thanks very much, Christine. And as we said, we're holding the questions till the end. Our next speaker is McHale with Qunitillion. Go ahead, Mac.
Thank you, Alex. Christine, Christine, great presentation and excellent progress. My name is Mac McHale. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for Qunitillion, and I'm going to talk today about Quintillion's current status, and just give you a quick overview on that. Some exciting initiatives that are underway today, and then foreshadow some of the things we're going to do in the future. So I'll start with the next slide and go over the SUBSEA system that we have. The SUBSEA network consists of about 1,200 miles up the northwest and north slope, connecting Nome across to Prudhoe Bay with landing stations, cable landing stations in 6 markets in Nome, Kotzebue, Point Hope, Wainwright, Utqiagvik, and down into Prudhoe Bay. It's a 3-pair system, and right now what's lit on the system is 10 terabits. Again, I mentioned 6 cable landing stations. They're not just cable landing stations, they're also distribution points, which is really kind of important. In development, in phase 2, we're looking to extend the network or expand the network and create a high capacity Alaskan gateway to Asia. So that expansion is underway as we speak. It's in the planning phases, and pretty exciting stuff. The network will expand from Washington State to either Ajigura or Wada in Japan. On phase 3, we're looking to go the other direction, to head east and establish Alaska as a gateway to Europe. Starting from Aliktok Point over to Tuk and Inuvik in Canada, then on to Greenland and to the UK. So the SUBSEA system is all in place. It has been up and running since December of 2017. And that connects to the next slide, where we connect into our terrestrial network, which the terrestrial network emanates from Prudhoe Bay and goes in two directions. It drives south from Prudhoe Bay to Fairbanks, Anchorage, and down to the lower 48. And it also drives west into the oil and gas infield, about 60 miles, providing services along the way. There's several add drop locations along the way. Is providing, that network, both down the Dalton Highway and in the oil field, is high capacity, low latency, accessible and available today. So we've combined the subsea network with the terrestrial system, open those cable landing stations, open the add drop locations on the terrestrial system. And now the plan is to start driving deeper and deeper, excuse me, into the interior of Alaska. Next slide, please. So we connect at each of our cable landing stations with the incumbent, back to Christine's ILEC acronym, the incumbent local exchange provider, what we'll call now the current or the incumbent telecom provider in each of these landing stations. And they distribute our services through either fiber, microwave, copper, coax, a combination of various access technologies for the last mile. As I mentioned earlier, we're lit at a 10 terabit level, but the system can go up to 30 terabits. So that's a ton of capacity. You can probably handle all the traffic coming in and out of Alaska on a busy hour, 5 times over. All this capacity is available for, commercial, consumer, and government, as well as anchor institutions in various markets. So we have good established relationships with some ANCs and the carriers around the state, and some major clients, and continuing again to look for creative ways to move broadband from those landing sites or those add drop sites deeper and deeper into the more remote and frontier areas. Next slide, please. So there's an exciting initiative going on right now, and it's driven by the notion that there's really only one place where polar orbit satellites can downlink at a very high latitude and pick up as many polar orbit passes as possible, and that's in Svalbard in Norway. But we have an initiative underway right now that's going on in Reykjavik, where we are partnered with a company called Atlas Space Operations, and we are building out a ground station as a service platform in Reykjavik. We have our first antenna, which is being installed as we speak. It will be, the installation will be complete this month, will be in test in December, and open for commercial business in the first quarter of 2021. So we're very excited about that. It's what's unique about it is it's a ground station that is connected directly to a terabit fiber system. So that traffic, once the polar orbit satellites downlink to that station, will be immediately on a 10 gig fiber optic link back to the internet exchanges in the lower 48. So it's there's some other unique attributes to it. I think when you look at the Svalbard situation in Norway, they've got high latitude, they've got fiber. What they don't have is U.S. soil, and a large percentage of the business that's going on in Svalbard is U.S. government and U.S. Private sector. So we will be starting small, but our intention is to grow this space and to grow from a single antenna to multiple antennas, and take that construct as far as we possibly can. Next slide, please. So Alaska is a gateway to the Arctic. I mean, the broadband connectivity is an underpinning for our defense infrastructure. It's clear. I mean, I think everybody's on that page. We're looking at the phase 1 infrastructure as an important segment of the foundation, but it's not the end all. Much more needs to be done. So we look at the international expansion, the expansion to Asia, the expansion to Europe, which creates sort of Alaska as the gateway or the fulcrum for that Arctic traffic. And we also look at the satellite ground station as an opportunity to bring traffic down from space. Now, when you look at the North Slope and you look at Reykjavik in particular, that's not necessarily a major metro area that drives a lot of data. But when you start talking about downlinking from Earth observation satellites, climate management satellites, those types of things, the data that's coming down from space to these high latitude locations can be very important, and it's just as meaningful as data coming out of a major metro. So again, we're looking to position Alaska as the US Arctic gateway and fulcrum to Asia, Europe, and space. We also, by definition here, we're really in support of the defense position as far as, early warning and kind of getting out front. The fiber optic network on the coast should be positioned very, very well for, long range radar and those types of things. And, we're also looking at the expansion to Europe, little stops in Greenland like Thule Air Force Base and that type of thing. So we're looking at those issues as well. Next slide, please. So kind of to wrap it up, the way to think about Quintillion and our strategy is we're looking at an in, out, and up strategy. And that is, first of all, our bread and butter is delivering services deeper and deeper into, coming off our landing stations and add drop locations and going deeper and deeper into the frontier markets around the state. And we're using many of the programs that Christine mentioned in her presentation earlier, from Universal Service Fund, the RUS, and so on. So the intention here is to build services to anchor institutions, schools, hospitals, libraries, and so on, and do that in a technology agnostic way. So fiber is not the only medium, right? But fiber combined with microwave, combined with satellite, combined with various other access technologies can deliver on the promise of what everybody's trying to accomplish here, which is broadband to all. So we're also looking to establish relationships with wireless ISPs around the state. So a wireless ISP, a wireless internet service provider, and some of these startups are innovative and creative, and I think it makes a whole lot of sense to help them get into business and start using some of these technologies. There's wireless technologies that are in play right now. Again, Christine mentioned the 2.5, the priority spectrum, and that's a great broadband wireless technology. There's also the CBRS technologies and white space, and they all have their place, and they all have different characteristics that serve different types of populations. So we're looking at integrating with all of those. Again, we'll enable the interconnection between Asia and Europe, and there ought to be a lot of traffic coming through that because it's a shorter route, so it improves your latency. Most everything now that's circling the globe is going across a continent or two, and you've got latency issues with that. Coming through the Arctic, you're going to reduce the length of those spans and improve latency on that as well. So again, our mission is to establish the Quintillion ground station and Earth observation services, that site in Reykjavik, and start to create a little bit of a competitive element for the folks in Svalbard. And again, I said, as I mentioned earlier, testing starts in December and services available in 2021. So again, Quintillion is on an in, out, and up strategy, and we're looking for creative ways and open to partnerships, and look forward to demonstrating massive progress in the next year and beyond. I think that should wrap it up for me as well.
Great. Thanks very much, Mac.
You're welcome, Alex. Thank you.
Thanks. We've already heard multiple references to LEO, low Earth orbiting satellite systems. And so we've actually got 3 such companies represented here. The first of those is IRIDIUM, and the next speaker is Josh Miner. Go ahead, Josh. Would you like to go ahead, Josh?
You may be on mute.
No, he's not. Josh?
Products and services.
There we go.
So we've been really busy over the past 5 years. We replaced our original network that's been in operation since 1999. We partnered with SpaceX and they launched 8 groupings of satellites totaling 75 satellites that you can see up in the nose fairing there with each of these launches, which replaced our constellation of 66 satellites that are active today, along with 9 spares that we have that are in orbit in the event that we need them. So it's a $3 billion network. It's very robust, and I'll give you an overview of some of the capabilities and how it relates to Alaska. So just a bit about the network first. It's low Earth orbit. It's 483 miles above the Earth's surface. It orbits in a polar elliptical orbit. There's 11 different satellites that are in each of the 6 planes, and the satellites are constantly moving, and they're cross-linked, and they have ground stations that are all around the world, but also located in Alaska. There's spot beams that provide connectivity with terminals that are on the ground. We have overlapping coverage. And the other thing that's unique about the network is that it's L-band spectrum, which is all weather. So it'll work in rain, it'll work in snow, which leads to superior availability. It's very reliable, but also because of the proximity to the Earth and the design of the network, we can also support very small, low-powered devices that are very easy to use, and omnidirectional antennas that connect with the network in a very simple and easy way. So this is an illustration of how the network works, and the overlapping spot beams and how the satellites connect with each other, providing the redundancy and the overlapping coverage in the ground. And just to give you an illustration of the ground network, we have what we call a teleport network, but it's a ground station that's in Fairbanks, Alaska. We also have ground stations in Canada, down in Chile, Norway, and they interconnect in with our gateway, which is in Arizona, as well as we have an operations center, which is in Leesburg, Virginia. But we're headquartered out of Tyson's Corner in Virginia, Northern Virginia. So we're a U.S. Headquartered company. So the way that we interconnect with other land-based services is that we effectively, through our interconnect satellites that mesh and route traffic around the world and to our gateways, we can interconnect with push-to-talk networks, cellular networks, landline networks, mobile networks, and we can get traffic to and from the public switch telephone network as well as the internet. And the way that we do that is we have specially designed terminals, which you'll see on the right, and they provide a range of different products and services ranging from narrowband all the way up to broadband services. And they provide communications that are complementary to a lot of the fixed satellite service networks that are available and provide stationary coverage. So our network is really optimal for things that move. And just to give you an illustration of where our network is utilized around the world, here's a view of 1 week of network traffic, ranging from what you see in the white is our narrowband short burst data traffic. In orange is voice calls, and in blue is broadband high-speed data traffic. But you can see that it truly is used globally around the world. But if you look in the upper left-hand corner, you can see that it's really blanketed. The state of Alaska is used pervasively across the state. It's a very essential service that's used, and it's used every day for a variety of different applications. So in Alaska specifically, here's just a view of where the satellites connect and what this looks like in Alaska. So We can have at any time up to 4 different satellites that are providing connectivity into the state of Alaska at a distance of 483 miles. The connection angle for the user that's on the ground can range from anywhere between 8 degrees up to 90 degrees. And by having multiple satellites in that region as they converge and they orbit over the poles, that provides very diverse coverage. It's very reliable coverage, and that's why it's used so extensively. We work very well in northern latitudes, which is very beneficial for Alaska telecom use. And we fill a lot of the gaps that were discussed earlier. So just an illustration of cellular networks, which are built out in very highly populated areas. We blanket coverage across the state, as well as the shores and the oceanic areas around the state of Alaska. So we can fill in those gaps with a whole suite of terminals that our partner ecosystem provides. So we'll get into those in a second here, but and we're very complementary to geostationary fixed satellite services. So fixed satellite services are really good at providing high-speed throughput to a fixed location like a building or a village. But where we really fit in is for mobile satellite services. So we have an array of products that can be used on ships, on planes, trucks, also on foot, and a whole spectrum of different devices that can support a variety of different services, from broadband to voice to tracking. So that's really the portfolio that we bring for mobile use. We can support fixed as well, but we're really a complement to fixed satellite services. So just a view of these mobility-focused products. In maritime, we have products that cut across maritime, land, and also aviation for broadband. We have speeds of 704 kbps for IP data, as well as multi-service terminals that support voice in those different vertical markets. We have tracking units that can be used on ships, as well as handheld and also in aviation. And then also voice for aviation use and handheld use, as well as in a plane. So just to give you a view of what those looks like for maritime use, we have a variety of different broadband terminals from industry leading partners like Thales and Cobham and Qunitillion that provide broadband connectivity that can be used for oil rigs or supply ships. They're very robust. They're all-weather design terminals. But then also for commercial fishing, we have tracking units that can be used for vessel monitoring or catch reporting, as well as vessel communication units for phone calling, email, and we are also recently safety certified for global maritime distress safety service. So now we can support GMDSS services as well for safety at sea. For aviation, we can support push-to-talk for safety communications, for search and rescue, medical response, for bush pilots, tracking for pilot safety, or for tracking and messaging, seeing where the delivery is located. That can work through our platforms, as well as flight communications for business jets over Alaskan airspace. And then for land, what this looks like for remote access, it could be fixed terminals in areas where, for whatever reason, fixed satellite service isn't practical for a reason. Like, as an example, if it's between 2 mountain ranges where maybe it can't get a signal, we can still provide fixed connectivity, but also deployable units that can connect through a portable Pelican case type terminal that can be used as flyaway kits for emergencies or set up for like remote construction. We support broadband for land applications. Personal communications, these are very small devices. Garmin has a whole portfolio of these devices that have Iridium inside, as well as there's a new class of messaging devices that are out there, and these support lone worker safety, tracking, messaging, as well as SOS. And then also our traditional satellite phone business for phone calling, text, and SOS. So over the past couple of years, we've seen a tremendous growth with our partner ICOM, which is a very well-known, respected provider of push-to-talk services. We can create a push-to-talk network using Iridium's network in the sky without having to build out terrestrial infrastructure. So that's a relatively new capability and a portfolio from ICOM, including vehicular and handheld, as well as interoperability units, which can be very complementary for fixed satellite services or for remote deployments. And just to summarize with how this all pulls together for the topics for this panel, yeah, I really see this being applicable in a few different ways. One specifically for rural villages. Yeah, I can see Iridium playing a big role in improved communication and safety for logistics, things that are moving, packages back and forth, travel, people that are going from one place to another, and also distribution of goods using Iridium's mobile satellite services to improve safety and you know, being able to be connected through satellite voice tracking and SOS. But also for economic development projects, being able to access mission critical information, coordinate on operations, complete projects, deliver revenue faster, get started sooner without having to wait for build outs. Yeah, we can certainly play a role in there with broadband internet, push to talk, conference calling support, remote worker monitoring, and we're ready today. So we're ready to connect Alaska today. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks very much, Josh. I think most of you have probably seen Juaneta's message in the chat that she is accepting messages for the speakers now during the presentation. So if you have any you'd like to submit, just go ahead and do that through the chat. Our next speaker is someone that most of us know. Chuck Schumann is CEO of Pacific Dataport, been doing business in Alaska for a long time. Chuck, go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning to the attendees in the panel. And I really appreciate the opportunity to share what we've been working on for the last 5 years. That's to bring affordable, high quality broadband to all of Alaska and the Arctic. It's been a fascinating panel so far, and I really appreciate Commonwealth North putting this together. I think this is just a great opportunity to get a lot of the messages and the participants out on the table. And Mac, I had to chuckle a little bit when you talked about 30 terabits. I think some of us will remember a telco. It wasn't that many decades ago that telco said that Alaska would never need more than 2 gigabit of capacity for the state. And so it'll be interesting to see in 20 years where we are and what you think about that 30 terabit comment. It's amazing where that goes over time. So let me get in here and share some slides with you. And do it. And Josh, just a shout out to you and Iridium. Got the chance to bring a boat up across the Gulf summer before last, and we really enjoyed that connectivity and being able to talk and communicate while we were on those long legs of coming across the Gulf. But it was great. Okay, so my first slide's just to cover our goal number 1 is to connect all Alaskans to the internet like never before. And we're utilizing our 40 years of satellite experience to improve healthcare, distance education, commerce, and emergency response opportunities across Alaska. We've pioneered many satellite communications first in Alaska over the years when others said it could not work or it couldn't be done. And starting next summer, we'll launch the AURORA service across Alaska with affordable new plans that will help close Alaska's digital divide and school homework gap. Yes. The best part, any tribal entity, telecom, school, health clinic, a small business that wants to provide cellular broadband within a community will have access to our satellite network to do that. We are working with dozens of the 2.5 gigahertz tribal spectrum applicants right now. It's been amazing how that groundswell of effort has come about. And So my staff's working with dozens of them right now to help them realize their plans to expand internet. And so Microcom set out to solve the problem. We just couldn't take it anymore, that we didn't have ubiquitous connectivity across the state. And so when we saw that others were not going to step in to provide broadband to all of Alaska, we decided to step in, and we started Pacific Dataport to build and launch a new generation of satellites for Alaska. Microcom is Pacific Dataport's parent company, and both of our companies are working to offer GEO, HTS, and LEO services starting very soon. And just to mention, I agree with Christina that this is all complex, and we congratulate the companies that have secured grants and support for their projects. However, we don't share the enthusiasm about the USDA and the support programs that do not allow support for the Aurora project and satellite solutions in general. We're in alignment with the Alaska Broadband Plan and the need for satellite. And we think that the USDA and the other support programs should begin to use economics in their decision-making. And we mean by that breadth of coverage, time to market, and retail cost to the consumer. We continue to build systems that are too expensive to use in many cases. And recently, if you look at the economics of some of the decisions that have been made, you can see that the cost is up to $300,000 per household. And we think we have a faster and more economical plan to reach everyone everywhere quickly. And let's see, next slide. So we have our first satellite under construction right now down in California. There's a great video on our website that Astronis produced about the construction. I welcome all of you to go and watch that. It's great to see all those individuals. It's being built down in San Francisco. Great team, and very exciting when I get the chance to visit there, which hasn't been much recently in our current state of affairs, but it's a fascinating project, and it'll be, that satellite will be launched next summer from Kennedy Space Center in Florida. We selected an orbital location with the highest look angle possible for us, and approximately 2 years later, our second satellite will have about 70 gigabits of capacity and park in an orbit near the first. And this is a slide that shows you a little bit about our technology, is that the Aurora 4A satellite will equal about 11 of the old C-band satellites. So that's our first satellite. And the Aurora 4 satellite will actually equal over 100 of the old C-band satellites when it's launched. All right, and the next slide is the coverage offered by the Aurora system will reach far above Alaska. And so I wanted to show this a little bit. You can see the green circles are representing the elevation angle from the 163 orbital location, and the orange is the 154 orbital location. So we've never had satellites that were designed and built and placed in geosynchronous orbit in optimal locations for Alaska. So we will, both satellites will cover the north slope at 10 degrees or greater in elevation. And as an example right now, many of the services that many of the participants here today satellite service that you use today are probably below 10 degrees or around 10 degrees down here in South Central Alaska. And so the Aurora satellites are going to improve the connectivity and the look angle very much. And we're able to get from those satellites all the way up above 72 degrees latitude. In fact, at 76 degrees north, we'll have over 5-degree elevation, which is our magic number across Alaska today for providing service. So we can communicate effectively up from the geosynchronous satellites up to above 76 degrees north. And we've had some studies recently for clients with airborne systems that have shown that we can have high capacity 1 gigabit or higher links to aircraft at altitude much higher than that, up to 80 degrees north and above. Let's see, next slide. And this is a showing of the Aurora 4A coverage. Again, showing the beams that are primarily over Alaska, but extend to the Arctic as well. And our next slide is a little word about our partner for the LEO constellation services, shows how their beams will be formed over Alaska. They're never static, though; they're always moving. So it's like the customer is the the static entity, while the antenna is moving. But again, OneWeb will provide instant access everywhere for everyone across the state, geographically covering 100% of Alaska and the Arctic. And our next slide is a little map that shows how all this comes together. So the Aurora 4A will connect to a gateway that we're currently building down in Utah and connect to the internet. And then Aurora 4 will have multiple gateways for that amount of capacity. They will be located across the western portion of the lower 48, and also one in Hawaii. The OneWeb gateway is located in Talkeetna. We'll have a message about that here in a moment. That our Aurora satellites will cover mainland Alaska and extend coverage down the Aleutians, and it's a hybrid GEO and LEO system that offers subscribers the type of service that they want. We'll allow clients to choose the type of service that fits their need, and we're not going to tell a subscriber that you have to have one type or the other. That's the Microcom way, and that's what's won all of our awards for customer service. You want low latency, we will have that, and if you want the highest throughput and lowest cost broadband, we will have that too. In fact, we believe that Aurora LEO service will offer connectivity that will be the fastest service offering available across rural Alaska. So the next slide. So this is a word about what we did recently with our Iridium partner. We wanted to do a proof of concept for our hybrid technology, and so with Iridium's help, we set up a demonstration using Q's Geo HTS service with the Iridium Certus service, and proved the concept, showed the concept that we could run a simultaneous LEO Geo services over a single network. And we have a white paper about that on the website that you can download. But we appreciate the support from our partner Iridium for helping us with that project. Next slide. So a little bit about satellite commitments to Alaska. So Pacific Dataport, of course, we've committed to serving 100% of Alaska and into the Arctic, and OneWeb has committed to serving all of Alaska and the Arctic. And those services will be in service next year, so beginning in summer of 2021. We do not have that commitment from the other services at this point, and not Kuiper, not StarLink. O3b won't be that, won't reach up to Alaska for some time. So while we appreciate the efforts of those companies, we just wanted to point out that the only ones that have committed to 100% coverage of Alaska are the top two. So next slide, please. And this is just showing, this is a recent graphic of StarLink system, and we show there Alaska with the green dot in the middle. It's a little bit of a busy slide, but there's no satellites covering the Arctic or covering Alaska yet. And despite that we've got hundreds of satellites up there, we've got a ways to go yet. Next slide. And this is showing OneWeb's satellites that, lucky us, that they've started with polar coverage. And so we've got coverage of the Arctic and coverage of Alaska at this time. We're expecting to start testing the OneWeb system in Talkeetna in about 30 days. Next slide. And here's our OneWeb gateway up in Talkeetna. It's a 90-acre site, and this is a Microcom project that was developed to host satellite communication services, and OneWeb is our first client. And this is where the satellites connect to the internet as they pass over Alaska. And this facility represents more than $10 million in investment, and it will connect Alaska and the Arctic to the internet next year. And part of our solution was to create the Alaska Broadband Association. So we've started this. We welcome you to go and check us out on the web at alaskabroadbandassociation.com and participate in bringing affordable broadband to all of Alaska in the future. Sign up and share your news and information there. And so I think we've got one more slide, which was just some of the frequently asked questions, is that Pacific Dataport is a wholesaler of capacity that will sell AURORA capacity to everyone, and that needs that capacity, and Microcom is a retailer. Again, go to alaskabroadbandassociation.com, and our hybrid service offers the best option that will fit your needs across Alaska. And the final slide is, I hope you can clearly see that Pacific Dataport is the company that is pulling the solution together for 100% of Alaska. We've developed a plan, we're invested, and we're bringing broadband to all of Alaska. We know that that we're stronger by working together, and so we appreciate again the invitation to talk here on the panel and share our vision of the future. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks very much, Chuck. And Juanetta tells me she's still accepting questions in the chat as the speakers make their presentations. We've already heard some reference to StarLink, and fortunately our next and last and final speaker is David Goldman from StarLink, who is Director of Satellite Policy. David, you can go ahead now.
You're on mute, David. David, can I help you?
Oh yeah, sorry about that. Are you able to see my screen? I was just trying to get my screen share going.
Not yet.
All right.
So press the share screen, and then you see your desktop, and you'll find your slide deck file.
Let's see. Did that work? I apologize.
It's okay.
It's giving me a warning. I really apologize about this. It's blocking me from sharing. I think I sent one earlier. Would you be able to drive that for me? Is that all right?
Sure. Why don't you go ahead and just get started with your initial comments, and we'll pull up your deck.
Great. All right. So my name is David Goldman. I am the Director of Satellite Policy for SpaceX, and I work on the StarLink project, which is our low Earth orbit satellite broadband system. So to just give a little brief introduction to the company itself, in case you don't know it, we were founded in 2002 as a launch provider. And I think you heard from a few of the other presentations. We're very proud and excited to be working with a few of the other people who presented, like IRIDIUM, to help launch their satellites. In the last few years, we've been transitioning to start building our own satellite broadband system. This is, as low Earth orbit, it means a few things. It's to contrast with the traditional geosynchronous, is that we are much lower. It means we need a lot more satellites to be able to offer it. So we're licensed, our initial constellation is licensed for 4,400 satellites at about 340 miles up. We need to have that many satellites in order to be able to have coverage everywhere. So it's a pretty intensive endeavor, but at this point we've launched over 900, just about 900 satellites. It's because we're so low to the Earth's surface, our latency that we're getting is our median latency right now is about 25 milliseconds, so not really all that far off from fiber. It's pretty much unnoticeable from what you would get from a terrestrial system. And our initial throughput that we're getting right now, the median throughput is over 100 megabits per second. But we're still in an early beta stage, so there's still a range there, but it's averaging a little over 100 megabits. We're deploying quickly in order. Excuse me.
David, I just wanted to let you know we do have your slide deck up, and you can just let us know into advance, and Aaron will help you with that.
Oh, awesome. So right now I'm looking at the second slide.
Okay, go ahead.
So thank you. I appreciate that. All right. I see it. Yeah, exactly. And so in order to be able to launch that many satellites, we have to go pretty quickly. So we're now at a pace where we're going about 120 satellites per month that we launch. That's 60 satellites per launch, about every 2 weeks or so. We have our initial coverage is just started because these are non-geosynchronous. It means essentially that they move across the sky relative to where an individual is. So we have to have enough satellites up where when you lose one over the horizon, you already have another one in order to be able to have a continuous service. So we have that for continental, CONUS, we have it just the states that are bordering Canada, we just have enough now. We're going to be launching through the rest of the year and into the beginning of next year. That should bring down our coverage over kind of the main continent of the United States. It'll bring down our coverage for the rest of that. We are, in fact, we actually do have polar launches. We are licensed for polar constellation. We do fully plan on doing polar, and we actually plan to do our polar launches in the very near future, as a matter of fact, which would begin our service or begin our coverage that would cover Alaska. I believe that we have committed that we would have coverage by the end of next year, but I think we're going to begin our launches actually much sooner than that. Once we get those launches going, we'll be able to begin testing our service in Alaska. So that's coming in the pretty near future. We actually already have a gateway licensed and deployed in Alaska, so we're pretty committed to our service up there. So if we could flip to the next slide, please. What you get on the ground, we're direct to consumer. We're aiming to be a direct consumer service. So what you get on the ground is you can see a picture right now of what our dish looks like. We call it the StarLink consumer kit. It's a flat disk, essentially. We've been saying it's a UFO on a stick. It's self-install. You can do it all on your own. You get a kit that gets sent to your house that you open up. You get this dish. It comes with a stand, and it has a wire that connects to power and connects to Wi-Fi. So it pretty much, in less than about 5 minutes from the time you open the thing up, you can be getting it. It'll adjust and kind of find its right angle to the sky. It doesn't, once it finds its aim, it doesn't really need to move anymore. It digitally tracks the satellites, and once you're in your house, it's kind of it's not indistinguishable from what you'd get from broadband from any other kind of service. Essentially, you turn on your Wi-Fi box on any of your devices. You'll see that one of your Wi-Fi choices says StarLink. You click on that, and you're good to go. We are currently licensed for 1 million user terminals in the United States, and we have an application actually to up that to 5 million. The response we've been getting for it actually came in faster than we were initially expecting, so we're kind of upping up our request. So I think I can flip to the next slide. So this is where we are now. As I mentioned, we now have continuous coverage. Basically, the states for the lower 48, the states that are bordering Canada, we can basically offer service there now. We started just last week doing our public beta service. So it's now, you can go to our website and sign up. And when we have coverage in your area, we will get back to you and we'll start sending the user equipment to you. We are very excited about who our first customers were. And I know part of what you're thinking about is how do you get to some of these rural communities and tribal lands. Our very first customers that were signed up was a tribe called the Ho tribe in Washington State, which had been a historically unserved area, a rural area in Washington State. And so we prioritize, and we're continuing to prioritize, to find communities like that we can help. We signed them up. We now have, the tribe has Starlink service. And we're very, very excited about that. We also did a deal with in Washington State with the first responders there. So they had wildfires recently, and they were able to use our system because it's so easy to deploy and roll out. They were able to use our system in areas that were ravaged by the wildfires and be able to get connectivity for the first responders. We also recently announced that we are working with a school district actually in Texas to begin giving service to them, to a rural community that would struggle to get service without us. You can see on this slide, we have some of our just speed tests that we've been running. It's just the commercial speed tests on it, where we're getting, on these tests, you'll see it's like sub 20 millisecond latency, a little over 100 megabit throughput. We're seeing those speeds and a little bit better pretty regularly right now. So that's what we're rolling out, and we're doing kind of two things at once, where we are rolling out our beta test, and and to set expectations correctly, we're calling it our better than nothing beta test. It's still, we really just started last week, and so we're still working out the bugs, and there's some issues. We're not fully deployed, so we're trying to get it all going. But if you have a great fiber service, you probably don't want to turn that off. But if you don't have anything, this is probably better than that. So that's where we're going with it. And that's basically our status right now. Like I said, for Alaska, we are launching in the very near future. Next year is when we're going to probably start rolling out for Alaska. We are very interested. If there's communities that are interested in talking to us, we'd be really interested in hearing from you about that. And then can I flip to the next slide? This is just the last one, and this doesn't really affect how our service works, but just we wanted to, I know a lot of people, when they hear about the number of satellites that we're planning on deploying, they get concerned about, am I going to see the stars anymore, and is space going to be clean? So one of the things that we do just from the astronomy community, we work very, very closely with the astronomy community to find ways to make sure that we adjust our satellites in ways that it doesn't affect them. We're not there yet, but we're working very hard to make sure that we satisfy any of their issues. But the other thing is, we fly at such a low altitude that we're essentially like in the upper ends of the atmosphere, which means that we continue to get drag actually on our satellites. It's a lot of operators don't want to fly at these altitudes because you need so many more satellites to do it, and because you actually have to have relatively high performance satellites in order to be able to push against the drag. On the other hand, and this is the benefit that we really like about it, is that if you have any issues, or even just when you want to deorbit your satellites on purpose and actively deorbit them, they can be gone very, very quickly. We're thinking 3 to 5 years as a generation for most of our satellites. And so this was the last slide we wanted to put in there, is just, again, when you hear about the number of satellites, we wanted to let you know we are taking space safety very, very seriously. We're working very hard on it. The driving force of the altitude that we fly at actually is to make sure that we are as responsible as we possibly can be in maintaining a sustainable space environment that can be shared with all kinds of other services. That's pretty much what I had. So thank you very, very much for including us. Really appreciate the invitation.
Great. Thanks very much, David. And thanks to all of our speakers. I think this has been a great session. I actually follow this stuff pretty closely, and I learned quite a bit in listening to the presentation. So I appreciate all that. We're going to go now to Juanetta, who I think has some questions from the chat.
Great. Thank you so much, Alex. All right. We do have a number of questions. We'll try to get to as many of them as we can. Just for our panelists, do leave your cameras up. I'll spotlight you as we address the questions. I did want to, I guess the first question I'm going to throw to David. First of all, on behalf of my brother-in-law astronomer, thank you for your efforts to keep the night sky as clean as possible for viewing purposes. Part of the reason that he lives in Alaska is just to be close to the sky and be able to observe many, many things. So thank you for that. We have a number of questions about StarLink. And I just want to try and summarize them as much as possible. I was interested in your statement that you're serving already states along the Canadian border. And of course, we have a big Canadian border. But the question is...
I was trying to be, yes, I get it. I was trying to be, yes, in the lower 48.
Okay, thank you. Well, the question is for Alaska, specifically, when do you anticipate service in Alaska being available? And can you speak to what prices, what household prices will be for service and equipment?
Yeah, so two things. I don't have exact dates. Like I said, we're planning on our polar launch in the very near future. Which it's going to take a couple polar launches to have continuous service, but we're planning on starting that really shortly. Once we do that, we can begin testing. I think we're planning on full coverage by the end of next year. And so we may be able to start a little bit before then, but I don't have exact dates yet.
Okay. And what do you anticipate in terms of pricing for household services?
Oh, yeah. So our initial beta test that we're rolling out is starting with that the equipment itself is $4.99, and then it's $99 a month for your monthly service after that. We don't do there's no contract, there's no early termination fee. So once you buy it, if you don't like it, there's no other fees or anything. You're not locked into any contracts or anything like that.
Okay, thank you. And one last question directly to you, David. How many orbital planes are planned for the polar position of the constellation, and how many will be required to provide 24/7 coverage above 50 degrees north?
You're testing me on this. So we have a modification pending at the FCC to change our license. So we have what we're currently authorized for, and then what we've requested to be able to change it. And just so you know what the modification is, we initially had actually licensed the system to be at a much higher altitude, about double the altitude of where we actually would like to operate. Once we figured out that we could actually operate our satellites at the lower orbit, and that they would be able to withstand the atmospheric drag, we actually applied for modifications to lower them down because it's a safer orbit to be at. So we have that pending. We're hopeful that we can get it soon. So that'll adjust what we currently are licensed for and what we're hoping to have licensed in the very near future are a little bit different. If I'm remembering correctly, I think we have, I could be getting this wrong, so I maybe shouldn't be saying it, but I think we have like 10 planes at 20 satellites each in order to do polar. I actually don't have off the top of my head what's the critical mass to get the initial service. I don't have that off the top of my head.
Okay, and just one clarifying question on pricing. You mentioned what your beta prices will be. Is there a goal to drive that down to any particular price range? Yes. I don't have specifics on that, but we're working. We're starting with essentially as much as we're a big system, and it's kind of a weird thing to have nationwide coverage and still be a startup. We don't really have economies of scale yet on a lot of this, so we're building it out. And as we're building it out, we're working very, very hard to bring down the cost. I think our CEO has said that bringing down the cost for this is actually some of the hardest engineering problems there are. And so we're working very hard, but our goal is to be able to bring that down over time. Yeah, and not just over time, but as quickly as we can. Okay, great. All right, thank you, David. Okay, we have a number of questions. The audience is very interested in access to capital, financing these projects, and particularly with regard, I think, to last mile and middle mile projects. We've seen today the availability of federal grant funding has been particularly important for some of the projects. But can you speak to, particularly under current economic conditions and market circumstances, what is, and let me just say, Chuck spoke to, the economic model as opposed to a heavily financed through grant funding project. What kind of capital stacks will it take for these projects to be completed? And I think everybody may have a little bit of a piece of this, but maybe we could start with Christine.
Yeah, thanks. That's the question, really. Sometimes it may be a little bit of a flip comment, but I'll tell people in the lower 48. It's not that we don't know how to do this. It just takes a tremendous amount of resource. Everything that I talked about and more that's happening today, that financing puzzle has been put together through a combination of investment from the companies, from their member owners, and the federal programs, and even the state funding. Looking forward, what I see happening is just a continual incremental progress through these mechanisms. I mean, from my viewpoint, we are making real progress at an accelerated pace. 10 years ago, things seemed to be almost at a standstill, and that's couldn't be more transformed today. So more programs that are complementary to what's happening today, I think will only accelerate the pace.
All right. Anybody else want to weigh in on that one?
Sure, I'll be happy. This is Mac.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with Christine on that. I think that from a Quintillion standpoint, we have our backbone system is already in place. So that major investment's been made. So as we continue to drive further inland, those investments will be incremental. And they line up very, very well with the funding sources from RUS, from USAC. And also we'll look at funding internal projects as well. And they're just based on a business case basis. So that's kind of how we're looking at it at this point. And as new programs are announced and come out, we look at how they align, and we're always keeping an eye on how we can partner, and again how we can kind of extend or expand and propagate our services from our landing stations further into the interior.
Okay. Thank you, Mac. Anybody else want to weigh in on that one?
Well, I would add from Pacific Dataport, the AURORA 4A project is funded. The satellite and launch and insurance is all set to go. The gateway is built and all of that has been completed, and we're finishing the gateway down in Utah. The AURORA 4, the larger project that will give us more than 70 gigabit of capacity across Alaska, all over Alaska. That project will cost approximately $200 million, and that's what we're currently working to finish.
Okay. All right. We have some questions for individual entities online, and specifically Josh to Iridium. Can you speak to? Sorry, I lost you here. Can you speak to how much bandwidth will be available for users, and will it achieve broadband status?
Sure. So what we have today is 704 kilobits per second. That's our peak download speeds for terminals. That's not the total bandwidth. I mean, we can support tens of thousands of terminals, hundreds of thousands of terminals around the world. Providing those speeds on ships, providing them on land, and that's what we offer today. Now we are going to be improving those speeds over time, and our network is capable of 1.4 megabits per second, and we also have some improvements over the next couple of years, next few years, which is going to be improving the efficiency of our network and the types of speeds that we can offer, latencies, those types of things through a project that we call DNA, or Dynamic Network Architecture. So we're continuing to improve the network. Our satellites are software upgradable, and the terminals are future ready, so they can be upgraded. So those improvements will continue to be offered to customers that buy them today, as well as things progress in the future. But we've really just begun with the network that we have and the upgrades that we're going to be providing.
Great. All right. Thank you. We have some questions that really point to, again, we're interested in some of the policy issues to help advance services in Alaska's Arctic and across the state. But can the panel speak to what the status of the Alaska plan? That might be a Christine question to start with. And also the Alaska broadband plan, and what can we do as a state, particularly at the state level, to have our legislature and the current administration to really focus on deployment and access to services across Alaska. Christine, you want to start with that one?
Yes, thank you. The Alaska Plan is really a piece of what triggered the flood of investment that's happening right now. It's the catchy title for that stable federal policy and funding. It's actually only one piece of the funding from that Connect America Fund that is coming into Alaska. The other two, the umbrella of Connect America Fund also includes ACAM and Connect America Fund 2 that's funding some of Alaska communications investment. It's a tremendous success. I think the touching on the Alaska broadband plan, it really lays out the picture that we see happening today of advancement using multiple technologies. We'll always need that. There's been kind of talk about, do we need to dive in and do a comprehensive new plan? I think we should just devote our efforts to this build out that's happening right now, take a breath when we get better mapping, which will probably be within a year to 18 months. We'll have a lot better picture of what's out there because of new federal requirements around mapping. And then look, as far as the state provides stability through the Alaska Universal Service Fund. So making sure that program is on a sustainable footing would be one of my biggest priorities.
Okay. Anybody else want to speak to that? Kind of a wonky policy question. Thank you, Christine.
Well, I would, if I can jump in, Juanita, I think that we're making progress. We're just moving slowly. And the 2014 broadband plan, the goal was to get to 100 megabit down per user by 2020. And that's coming, we're here. And I think we all know that many rural communities, we don't even have 10 megabit down, and some are struggling to have 1 megabit down. And so I think we all need to come together. I think that was the point of Christina saying in her opening, was this is a complex thing. We need, the state can help by bringing us all together and having us work together towards this goal of serving all of Alaska. And I think other states have a broadband office and are more active in helping in this area. And I think what we're seeing right now is a lack of, there's not complete understanding within the state that of the benefits of the projects that we're doing in rural Alaska. It's really, it can be a little bit strange, but I think at the pace that we are on, it's going to take us 2 decades or more to reach everyone in Alaska, if we can do it the way that we're doing it today. And it's going to cost a couple $2 billion. And so that's why we are proposing that we look at things with a more from a more economics viewpoint. Thanks. Great,
thank you, Chuck. We have a number. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to add, I'll be quick, but a quick point. It's very likely at the federal level that next year there's a lot of talk right now about having a large infrastructure bill that'll have a lot of federal money, including, I know one of the bills in the House has, what was it, $100 billion, I think, going to broadband. I think from my perspective, one of the things that I think Alaska is actually pretty forward thinking on, but a lot of states are not, is building it with performance metrics rather than specifying a certain technology. I think in order to be able to address the issues that we're talking about with Alaska, is you need a mosaic of different technologies coming in. There's a lot of different problems in Alaska. There's a lot of different ways to solve the problem. And so we have to do that in a technology neutral way that you can bring in the different technologies. And I worry that there's going to be some efforts to narrow down who can get the money, who can get this funding to very specific technologies that frankly may be more expensive and take much, much longer to deploy, getting to the timing cost. And I think when we're talking about the urgency of getting this done, I think making sure it's available for anybody who can reach the minimum requirements. We should set aggressive minimum requirements. I don't mean minimum requirements as anything low, but aggressive minimum requirements. But anyone who can meet those requirements then should be able to take it and try to deploy as quickly as possible. So I just want to put in a pitch of like thinking about making sure that we don't accidentally, because of interest in other states, accidentally lock ourselves in and make it harder in order to be able to fund the Alaska service that we need.
Great, thank you. Anybody else on that question? Okay, I've got, I apologize to the panel and to the audience. I do get beat up when I go over time, or I allow this session to go over time, but we do have a lot of other questions. And I'm going to try and encapsulate them in 2 questions with your indulgence. So there's a number of questions, a lot of interest in terms of looking at your footprint maps and thinking about our relationship with our other Arctic neighbors as to can you extend either your existing or planned services to incorporate additional service to the Arctic, specific to, in the case of Quintillion, lines to Greenland and Canada, and also with regard to some of the satellite providers. So can you talk about any of your plans for that circumpolar Arctic footprint?
I can start.
Go ahead, Mac.
Yeah, so yeah, actually earlier this morning, I was on a call with the Submarine Network event that normally goes on in Singapore. And it was all about the Arctic. And we are actively partnering with a number of entities, based on NDAs. I really can't mention who they are, but we are working actively with folks around the globe that are interested in Arctic strategy and Arctic policy. So we're open to it. We're working on investment ideas. We're working on technology ideas and everything in between. So not much in the way of specifics that I can share, but I can tell you that it's a hot stove right now, and we're working on a multi-course meal.
Great, thank you. Anybody else on this one? Okay, all right. Well, one last question then for the panel. All of the things that we've heard today from all of you are very exciting for Alaska, and particularly for the Arctic region. But can you speak to about what the interoperability of the services are? You've addressed those to some degree in your prepared comments, but I think the technology part of it can be a bit daunting for the average household in rural Alaska to think about how does it all come together as a puzzle to provide that ubiquitous broadband service across Alaska. So can you speak to the interoperability issues?
Well, I can take that one. I mean, Pacific Dataport our goal is to be able to sell to any company that wants that middle mile. So we'll be delivering middle mile into villages and across Alaska next summer, so that any company or any entity can buy that middle mile and resell it in their service. And then we will use Microcom to provide direct-to-consumer services across Alaska as well. So either way, we would provide that interoperability. And with OneWeb, we have complete coverage of the Arctic. Those 2 gateways, Svalbard and Talkeetna, are built and ready to go. They have one more gateway to build in Greenland to provide the complete Arctic coverage. Thank you.
Anybody else want to speak to that one?
Yes, Juanetta. Just to plug in for the long-term telcos who've been on the ground and will remain on the ground in Alaska ongoing and are often owned by the communities they serve. We're there. We have great partnerships. Mac touched on that, and welcome these new entrants. David and so on reach out to us because, direct to consumer is usually great. But, when I think of my 81-year-old mother-in-law who lives in Dillingham, and I think she still has a rotary phone on the wall, it's probably not going to work for her, but she needs connectivity, and our member cooperative that's there is on the ground. So just a shout out there to maybe be flexible in the business models.
Okay. Matt?
Yeah, no, completely. And I would love to talk, but we don't, not everyone has to hear, but yeah, it would be great. Just from our perspective, the user equipment, as I mentioned, it's once you get it into the house, it's a Wi-Fi box, it's standard Wi-Fi. So, I mean, that interacts. As far as like the middle mile part, we are looking at, and if anyone wants to talk about this, the other thing is our equipment can actually support backhaul for mobile. So we're not offering a mobile service ourselves at this point. We are fixed service, but because of the latency and throughput that we can offer, we actually could be backhaul for wireless systems. And it can just plug in. It's not that difficult for us to do. So that's another way where maybe we can be supportive. And Christina, you know, maybe that's something else that we can be talking about. But I hear you. It's while our user equipment is meant to be as user friendly as possible, I understand that it's not everyone is going to be able to do that, and we are looking at different models and talking to different people about how to do that. But like I said, we just rolled out our public beta last week, so we're still, you know, we're crawling before we're walking.
And Mac, it looked like you wanted to weigh in on that.
Yeah, I did. I think, I think all of us as service providers need to understand that we need to make the issues of interoperability and the technology, it needs to be transparent to the end user. And I think for the most part, we do a pretty good job of that. I think what we have as an industry is we've got pretty good standards. So interoperability is kind of inherent in the industry. And that, you know, gives us the opportunity where we can interconnect all these different technologies. Again, whether they're fiber, whether it's licensed microwave, unlicensed microwave, satellite of various flavors. I mean, it all can work together. It's a matter of targeting a customer and then taking all the mystery and all the kind of sausage making process out of the picture. So they just get a connection, they can turn it on, and you know, it finds their satellite, or it homes to their radio dish, or in the case of fiber, it's always on. And it ought to be that simple. So, and I think we're in a good spot to do that. And again, the cooperative mentality that I hear every day here in the state is going to get us there.
Great. All right. Thank you. I lied. I'm going to ask one more question because it's such an important thing for Alaska's Arctic, which is the applicants for the 2.5 gigahertz. We heard a little bit from Chuck that he's working with some of those licensees, and I know that there are folks on the line that probably have were either successful in that process or hope to be successful. I don't know the status of all of that, but can you speak to what role you think that'll play in telecommunications in the Arctic, and particularly to some of our smaller communities?
I can take a stab.
Go ahead, Mac.
Yeah, so I think it's a great thing that it's a licensed spectrum. So that means that nobody's going to interfere with that spectrum, and it also gives a little bit of pride of ownership. And it is a good spectrum for broadband, both its propagation characteristics and its capacity characteristics. So I think native village that can lock into that spectrum, as long as they've got middle mile capacity and capability and the ability to operate that last mile, that can be a very, very good thing. I would also say it can be combined with other wireless spectrums and technologies, and again, for the purposes of getting a ubiquitous coverage as opposed to a one size fits all. But I think it's terrific. I think it's great, and I'm glad to see the Tribal Broadband Association make as much progress as they did, as quickly as they did, and I think it's fantastic.
Great, thanks. Chuck?
Well, I think that the excitement about the 2.5 gigahertz is really showing that all of these communities want broadband. That's the reason they've all jumped out here to file for this spectrum, because they believe that that's going to help them get broadband sooner. And we agree with that. And we applaud the excitement, but there's 4 steps. They've got to plan it, they need the equipment, they've got to have the backhaul, they've got to have that connection back to the internet, and then they've got to manage and operate that business. And so we've stepped up to help them with planning and supplying equipment installations. We've got the first 2.5 gigahertz demo that we're finalizing the planning for in the first community right now. And then we will be there to provide backhaul to any one of these systems across Alaska, and then to be able to help them operate them and manage the services themselves. And so we're excited about it.
Okay, great, thanks. Anybody else on that question? All right, well, we are over time. I do apologize. You can send your, throw your rocks through email at me for not landing on time. Alex, do you have any closing comments that you wanted to share with the group?
It's been a great session, and I really appreciate all the presentations. Thanks.
Thanks. And Mead had to leave us earlier for a meeting with his financiers for some of his projects. So on behalf of Mead and our other Arctic Policy Study Group co-chairs, Bob Cox, I see, is online. I believe Gail Schubert has been with us. And I know Moira Bockenstedt was with us for a short time as well. We thank you all for participating today. It's been a very enlightening session. And with that, we'll wish everybody a good and a peaceful day, and hopefully whatever you're hoping for in the election outcome, some additional clarity about what happened yesterday. Thank you so much.
Thank you.